meeting for what the commission should work on really like over the next few months. And I think we'll have some time to get into some specifics, but we'll also have sort of a lot of agenda topics just to cover. And so I think as a result, it's okay if we're not digging into the details and coming up with concrete deliverables in this meeting. That's going to be for future meetings. At least that's sort of the scope that I'm envisioning with this agenda. Great. So then let's start with our public comments.
There's no guests online today.
I
Okay.
have one quick thing. James Held's Vermont Land Trust on June 24th is showing the new neighbors video online, and I let Reed know about it since he's in it, but if any commission members want to be on the panel that day, they said to get in touch, and I gave Reed the contact info in case he can do it.
Yes, I haven't actually opened your email, but I saw what it was about.
Okay.
I have a lot of email.
I know the feeling.
It's on my starred items list.
What land trust is this?
Vermont Land Trust.
Vermont Land Trust.
Jim is also.
I was just gonna say, we do, a lot of our work is through them when we conserve properties and do, development rights purchases and things like that.
Yeah, Vermont Land Trust and Trust for Public Lands were the two that attended our Wild Williston event as well, and had like some tabling items and spoke to people.
Great.
Jim asked me to potentially join in that one as well, so.
Oh, yeah.
Assuming I can make it, I'll probably take him up on it. We went out to look at the exposed dam last week. Kind of muskrat swimming down the stream, which is
That's
pretty
really
great.
fun.
A lot of otter tracks out there, and still plenty of beaver activity. I ran into another local who said he found a new bank dam a little bit further down the brook, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely saw evidence of new chew and some. They've started to chew at the base of some large cherries
Mhm.
along the banks there.
Enough to girdle them, if they've been around all the
Exactly. Yeah, some of them are all the way around and some of them they just started, but yeah, they're taking down some big things.
Cool. I still like working with cherry. Cherry is a nice wood to work with.
Oh, yeah, it is great.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree.
Yeah. They put it to a different kind of use. Any other public comments?
I can add one other thing, which is, not super conservation related, but there's, the Energy Committee and the Housing Committee are two of the sponsors for an upcoming workshop. For the Williston community that's focused on thermal energy networks, which is basically neighborhood scale ground source heat pumps that are networked together and allow buildings to share their excess heat. And use other buildings' excess heat. There's a nonprofit that's helping Williston communities explore this technology and see if projects want to develop, and it's gonna take place on May 7th. There are many sponsors and so on. I'll send a formal invite to everybody, so if you wanna join us, you can, but it's gonna be a pretty significant size workshop, maybe 50 people. Doing hands-on activities and presentations, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a really promising thing. I've done some reading on that too.
Yeah,
Ground source heat pumps on a neighborhood scale.
Right, you get the benefit of the ground source heat pumps like twice as efficient or maybe more than the air source heat pump, and then you get the heat sharing effect and it can really.
The upfront costs are substantial.
Right.
But
Yeah.
Once you pay that off, and who knows what the payback time is, it might be 15 years or something, but.
Yeah.
Then it's just minor electrical costs to pump water around basically after that.
Exactly, yep, and there's potential to combine it with a TIF district, which the planning commission has been looking into. It's a specialized tax district. This allows you to basically borrow money without having to taxpayers foot the bill for the bond. So anyway, it should be interesting,
Okay.
and I'll send out information about it.
All right. Excellent.
Not too close to your day job. So.
Yeah, that's right there. And no comments. Let's review the minutes.
Whenever you want me to. We could do it at the end
Let's
too.
I had no comments on the minutes, they looked good.
All right, I've got them up here on the screen in case anyone would like to view live.
Thanks, Dave.
And I'm gonna make this full screen. Just give a gentle scroll. And I'll be taking over the minutes starting today, so if
Okay.
if there's a density of information that you have a preference for, just let me know. I can adjust for more abbreviated or more information dense.
It's really hard to find a balance with
Yeah.
these broad agenda topics. The main point of the public minutes are when decisions are
Right,
sort of being captured, or there's a specific action item or, go-tos that we need to sort of keep track of.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you have to sort of like predict the future and be like, what are we gonna wish was in the minutes, so when we search for it, we're like, oh, that's what we talked about.
Can you use AI for that? Minutes?
Yeah, I'll
I'm just
look into
curious
that.
how
I know
well
there's-
that works, cause we'd rather have you, I mean,
Yeah, we
I think it's great you're doing that, but. We'd rather have
Yeah.
people involved with the discussion and focusing on thoughts and help with things,
yeah, thank you for that, Gary.
if it's possible.
There are tools and Zoom has a built-in AI assistant, so I'm gonna take a look at that this week and see if that's easy to figure out or if you have to enable something else. And I've seen it in action. It usually does a pretty good job that, with editing. I mean, you can correct any.
Does it identify who's talking to pretty well?
Oftentimes, sometimes it gets confused or doesn't do it accurately, but it's remarkably good, at least from the 2 AI transcripts I've read. So,
great. And obviously you have the recording as
Yeah,
well. so-
exactly.
Yeah, I didn't have any comments on the agenda either.
I'll move approval of the minutes. From April 2nd.
I'll
Thank you. Gary seconds, all in favor of approving as written. No edits.
I,
Aye, okay, all approved. Excellent, so we know that Eric is not gonna be here today or next week, so, I'll just flag that for everyone's awareness that hopefully, I do not know when Kim is coming back, but I'm assuming she won't be back until,
I guess it might even be as long as the end of the summer, who knows?
Yeah.
How long she'll stay out there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
so, we're gonna have to do some recruitment and we're gonna have to do some,
Oh,
close.
I do know that somebody applied. For the conservation.
oh,
Great.
good.
Cool.
So I don't know when that will come to the select board for review, whether they'll. I don't think they'll wait for other people to apply to consider because we have so many openings. I think they're trying to. Just fill things with whoever steps forward.
Okay, great. And then I know that when the select board interviewed me, I think I'm the last one who has joined. It was like the next day was the meeting and
So you hopped right in.
so I hopped right in, even though going into it, I thought the meeting was at 7 PM and then Eric disabused me of that notion and said, no, 7 AM. I said, what? What did I just sign up for?
I think Kim will be back beginning July. Her text message when I asked said late June.
Okay.
Yeah. So expect her in July.
Excellent. All right, so we have a couple topics to get an update from Dave on.
Yeah, thanks. So I figured it might be helpful. Obviously, we can play with structure and organization on weeks where we have, more pressing business or different kind of business, but I thought it might be useful to just take a few minutes up front for quick updates on topics that I either have some information on or been working on. And I'll try to get us back on schedule. So I'll try to be pretty brief here. Jacob Krantz, no update yet. I'm speaking to Tim and Nick from WVPD today. Alan Brook, I was out at the site with the engineers who received the commission to put a design together. And the news there is not fantastic. It seems, so this project, just from looking at the notes, from Andrew, my predecessor, it seems like I'm picking it back up after it maybe has been not looked at for a little while. I know the engineering company did some surveying last fall, but I don't know if much work was done over the winter. In the meantime, the water courses continue to change, there's continued to be more erosion. It's a very dynamic situation to maintain a full span bridge. And so the area that is compromised that was 30 feet, and the short-term solution was, okay, let's do a little bank armoring and fix that span, and the rest of the bridge is kind of, still intact. Now they're considering, okay, that area that's compromised is more like 40 feet, and the difference between 30 and 40 feet is significant in terms of what you propose for design, so more bank armoring, potentially, a deeper or different kind of post to support the bridge. So that project, what I asked them to do was give me a new update on what the quick fix would be. The previous design of, okay, let's span it, and we know things could still change in the future. But we can fix this now and get it back in action, and we'll see what the future brings. That was estimated to cost, the select board approved it for 55K, 15,000 for engineering fees, and about 35 for engineering and permitting fees, and about 35,000 for the initially proposed design. And my guess is that would be insufficient now for what would be required.
You know when that was that 5 years ago or last year?
That was just 18 months ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious.
It was like January or
Yeah.
February or something last year.
Yeah.
I've spoken with Josh from Timber and Stone, who's worked on this bridge before. Maybe constructed it. I'm not sure if he was the original constructor, but it's definitely done repair work on it in the past. And Josh is invested in the project and willing to work on it this summer, but I think it's going to kind of depend on what's going to come through with the engineers. They are working on it now. Again, well, they may have been. I just wasn't in communication with them. I don't think anyone was over the winter, but they're working on it. So they're going to get me that number and sort of a design for what would be the immediate fix if we wanted to kind of arrest it in place. And then I think the question that's going to ultimately come back to you is, do we want to try to proceed with something that it may be a shorter term fix? Might be viable for 5 or 10 years, but we really don't know because flooding and continued dynamic change in that floodplain. Or do we need to really have a bigger and longer conversation about reevaluating potential crossing sites for a longer term, more permanent sort of flood proof, climate proof solution if one exists?
Let me give you my 2 cents.
Yeah.
First.
Go for it, Gary.
I think it'd be nice to know the cost of that additional option. I mean, are we doing 40,000 versus 400,000 or 40 versus 100, or so that would help my decision making. If I know it's only 100, I'd say, let's just find a way to do the whole thing, because it's a waste of 40 if you're gonna have to spend 100 within a few years. So if that's possible.
It's a great question, Gary, and I think that's exactly what I will endeavor to find out.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we'll be able to get an exact number on a full redesign, because that would probably require more engineering costs. And we want to try to avoid sinking money to the project, before we know too much. But hopefully I can get a ballpark from them. And unfortunately, the tough thing right now is there's no federal funding. And state funding is going to be considerably more limited for this kind of thing. So it's an evolving situation. I'm going to try to get as much information as I can. And it was good just to get the engineers out there, reconnect with them on this, and hopefully have some more information from you as the spring evolves.
Reed?
I mean, what this makes me think of is just how much money we're spending on to repair the bridge, the pedestrian bridge that doesn't go to any sidewalk over the Ellenbrook down at Industrial Drive. I think it was in the millions.
To build it.
No, to repair
To repair it?
Yeah, there's a pedestrian bridge that goes from 2A down Industrial toward Route 2.
Oh,
And
that
crosses the Ellenbrook, and then the sidewalk ends.
Yeah.
But it's a like cement, so it's like a serious bridge, metal and cement full thing, and that is, I believe, has been approved for replacement or whatever, it's gonna be a lot of money.
Huh.
And I'm thinking of that this
There's
is
limited
way
use of
small.
it, you
And
don't
it
go.
doesn't go to anything really, but it
Wow.
exists.
Matt says, I had the same question, if you remember, like 2 months ago, and Matt said that that was a very high frequent, high use.
Yeah, I do think people use it, but it doesn't go to any connected pedestrian facilities on the far side, people just walk down the side of the
Yeah,
road.
so it's more
from
of
there.
yeah.
So in the summertime, I'm sure a lot of people are walking there, but because there's a park and there's businesses and lunch and, you know, there's sandwich shops and so on, but car repair, people might be walking back from car, dropping off at Dave's Automotive or whatever. But it just makes me wonder whether there's a conversation to be had with the manager's office about like, if we find out that we literally can't reopen that bridge, the Allenbrook Nature Trail Bridge, boardwalk without more funding, like what other options
Right,
do we have? Are there other items that have been approved for the budget for this year that could be tweaked?
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling if we announced to the public that it wasn't gonna be open all summer, well, people are still using it. I mean, every
Mhm.
single day I go by, there's
Right.
people on it. So, and the town is very concerned about, the manager's office is very concerned about liability. So I would think we need to do something.
Mhm.
I don't think you can keep people off of it. You need to make it safe for people to walk across.
Yep.
Even if that just means like leaving it all wonky, but like
right.
sistering it up so that it's not going to just collapse. But so I would be interested in a conversation with the manager's office about liability concerns about the way it is and what fund buckets we could be considering if it's more than what was budgeted. And then the second thing would be, for the engineering, I would like to know, like, what's the cheapest option that would make it so that people aren't gonna fall into the river?
Yeah.
That's, I don't think it needs to be beautiful. A lot of times I feel like you ask for a phone, people like, they assume it has to be like ADA accessible, and like, if this is a
Right.
short-term solution, that's one of the dirt cheapest.
That was one of their first questions, is it meant to be ADA accessible? My assumption is that it's
The
not.
gravel
it's
path down to it isn't
basically-
either.
And if it's not federally funded, it doesn't have to be. I would assume the restrictions are different. You don't get federal funding.
Yeah. Their second question, whether whether we'd consider a change in alignment, essentially. Changing where the bridge is initiated from the Village Park side. And I basically gave them that same directive. I said, okay, well, what would be the cheapest option to just get it back in commission as safely as we can? Knowing full well that, we can't control for future climate change, flooding and beaver activity entirely.
Yeah.
And I think your argument, especially about the liability, is really, that's kind of the argument for that shorter term fix is, there's a significant investment there. Some of it is, most of it perhaps is even still usable. And so we can get the bridge fixed, people are using it, liability is more covered.
Gives us time.
Yeah.
Right, we can get more investment out of that.
It's an improvement so much as it is a shoring up of
Yeah.
what the existing bridge is.
Right.
And I think that should be the clear directive
Okay,
for them.
sounds good. Well, I will,
Yeah, I just had one more question for maybe Dave and Reed is, do you guys have a gut feeling of how it might move and be either a more secure or a shorter crossing somewhere else through that area? I know it's.
I think it is at the shortest spot personally.
It's at the shortest spot today.
Yeah.
Having been down there and like walked around on the floodplain now that it drained. I can say that basically where they dammed it and created the pond is a relatively unchannelized wide floodplain.
Mhm.
And then like right where they created their dam, because they're smart, is where it becomes much more channelized. And so I think
Potential
if-
shorter span.
So I think if and I'm not an engineer, but I think potentially if you moved the spot where it comes off of the bike path upstream to where it was less channelized and then had like a zig in it, because there is like a pretty stable island for at least for right now. And who knows, maybe that section is like on floaters so that if it changed, maybe it's on like a floating system so that it can rise and fall.
Yeah, like a dock.
It's kind of how I'm envisioning it, is that you harden the parts that need to be hardened, and then you make the rest of it more flexible so that it can sort of handle movement in the middle where you can't control it.
I guess so.
Yeah.
But I'm imagining like kind of like a Z, or a two L's that connect in the middle.
The other issue with that, and I don't know,
Pull up an ortho with
I don't know what the property line is with Creek's Edge here. And
Yeah, it looks smaller there, but is that what, that's it?
that's it.
Okay,
That is the smallest in my
yeah,
read of it. I mean, I think potentially crossing over here where you've got two better banks, but it's a longer span.
yeah.
I mean, the bridge right now,
there, you can make it nice and big on
And is
there.
most of the
Oh,
beaver
yeah.
centered around?
that I
area?
don't know. I saw the beavers up here,
Yeah.
but. And Reed, do you say the beavers are further south too, like the bridge
Well,
right now?
I think they're
Davis-
further north.
They're in
now.
this section a little bit.
Mhm.
I mean, there are other places
Yeah, there's a
too,
bank
but-
there, but those are generally temporary and they'll probably look for a new place to build a new lot. There's also Jim reports that
Down
there's,
here.
you know, there's activity happening down here.
Yeah, this
Oh,
is
yeah.
the bridge to Old Stage, yeah,
Yeah,
so
this is
from
the
this
Old
bridge,
Stage
you can see that there's a dam here. Right now, so
Yeah.
right now, it's like, this is all backed up, there's actually a second, this whole thing is now basically a
Right.
giant flood.
But not impacting the bridge yet?
Well,
Partially.
yeah, I mean, it's, they're back active in this area again. But if you go back to up to the current
Must be a
boardwalk,
dam,
there's,
Mhm.
Yeah,
you can see that it's pretty wide here, that
Mhm.
basically our problem is that it's continuing to wind more and more, and so it's kind of digging in, even if it stays in the channelized, it's digging in on the supports on the
Exactly.
northeast.
Yeah,
And so I'm thinking like, what if it came in like here and then went down and then across and used the existing part, but I mean, in the future, it could go over there.
right. That is essentially what the engineers were wondering, you know, if that middle island is more stable. But I think that is not a question you could necessarily know. for
Answer,
sure.
yeah, between
And
beavers
that's
and
why I
climate
say
change.
the middle connector may, in my head, the middle connector may need to be something that can float on water. So that if it gets dammed up, it's still good. If the thing moves, there might be a little like dip in it or something, but.
You are almost.
Well, oh, sorry. go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna think, when you say float on water, you know, the docks you see where they have the rings
Right.
around. Is something that can go,
Up and
is that what you
down.
kind of mean?
Yeah.
So it stays stationary and stable, but has the flexibility of moving up and down.
And is not
Great
rigid
idea.
in a plane that like it can like sort of flex it, so if the channel moves a little bit, it might have a little dip in it, but that it's got like hinges in it so that it can adapt to that. That's
Yeah.
kind of in my mind. but-
Vital.
well, we should let the engineers.
But
Yeah,
but we're not
perhaps-
engineers, so.
Yeah.
No, but they're good questions to be asking and,
I just know
I
the
think-
principle is you either
Right.
harden or you soften, you can't.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you soften it, you have to prepare that, like, you're gonna have to repair it more often too.
Yeah.
Because hinges break, and
Yeah.
Yeah,
floaters,
if there's
Stop
ice,
floating,
how does that work?
you know,
Yeah.
I mean.
and the other thing is they can use just a different material entirely for, you know, they can use large posts that go down much deeper.
Yep.
That would be resistant to
Yep.
flooding. Or more resistant to flooding, but it's just more cost, different design, and the other thing is it's more impact. For, you know, Vermont state, bridge and stream alteration permit.
Mhm.
And there may be a point at which that impact becomes, you know, large enough that the state, you know, feels differently about kind of the proceedings. You know, currently, Engineering Ventures said that they're pretty okay with what was proposed initially with a certain amount. I think maybe it was 25 feet of bank armoring. And the fix in their initial conversations. And wetlands has basically said, you know, we'll follow streams and rivers. But as that impact grows, Army Corps has an opinion, Bridge and Stream might feel differently. And there might be more mitigation costs associated with that. So they're great questions and I don't want to take up too much more of our time, given that there's a lot of unknowns in this project. So I'll just say, keep all these questions coming and I'll funnel them right over to the engineering team and. Try to light a fire under this, because I know that it is a priority for the community.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
Thanks.
Now the DRB update.
I'll just very quickly, so Baturf and Glazer, which was reviewed by the CC, those were at DRB on April 8th. Both were moved forward to the next stage of the permitting process, producing final plans with minimal changes. And I don't know if there are any questions about that. I didn't note any changes that were particularly relevant to the Conservation Commission. Other than what you'd already waited on for these two.
So let me throw something out that Reed was talking about earlier. I wonder, is Glazier a project that could do one of these ground source heat pump community things, or are they too far beyond that now?
Residential, yeah, we can talk about it, but residential only is not an ideal situation.
okay.
You need mixed use largely.
Okay, thank you.
Unless you're looking at the village strip and the growth center.
Other quick updates is you actually had 3 applicants for the open position for the Conservation Commission. One is withdrawn. After a meeting with me, decided that it was maybe too much or more work than kind of was understood initially. But yeah, 2 active applicants, Lynn Blevins and Jonathan Eddy, I believe, or Edie or Eddie. And both of them will likely, I'd guess, be reaching out to me just to learn a little bit more. So
That's great.
yeah. And we have signed on for the EAB treatment of the tree of Mud Pond Conservation Area. That funding was already approved in one of our line budgets.
EAB treatment.
Emerald Ash Borer. So limb walkers, I believe that's been one of our standard providers for that. We'll be going out there. And the only thing that's changed there is that they've upped the recommended dose of pesticides. Because infestation density has gotten higher in the area.
Now, has that been done one other time? That tree?
2023, I believe.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I know
So
they've
every
been done
2 years,
every
right?
2-3 years, yeah.
Is it the big tree on the corner? Can you remember saying about a corner of a parking lot? or
Yeah,
Yeah.
right where
Yeah.
the parking lot is to the left.
Which one?
Okay.
What parking lot?
Mud Pond parking lot,
The country
right
park,
outside,
yeah.
South Road.
Do you happen to know what the cost is now?
$500.
Mhm.
So
And it
it's-
was-
So, yeah, they basically give us 2 options. There are $300 for a medium dose treatment or $500 for the recommended high dose treatment. And Matt said, it's approved in our budget. Let's just go for the high dose treatment.
I agree with that.
What's the longevity of the treatment before it has to be retreated?
2 to 3 years.
I guess, yeah, consistent at 2 to 3 years.
Okay,
So
all right.
It's either that or take it down just because it's right at the parking lot and they get so fragile, right? So.
So a question for moving forward, but yeah, for now, it seems that was really following up on as I understand, something that was already discussed by you all in the past.
It's a regular talk.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. And we'll find out what trees are planning to get cut down this summer. My neighborhood was last summer.
Okay.
And they cut down all the trees without.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and some may not have actually been ashes.
All right, and last quick thing, sorry to be taking some more time, is USDA has reached out about putting oral rabies vaccine bait stations on town-owned property and private property in northwest Williston. Private property, we have no control over whether somebody wants to say yes or no. But they proposed 15 town-owned parcels that they want to scout for locations for these bait stations and then follow that with live trapping, catch and release to determine the efficacy of the vaccine. And 2 of those are conservation parcels. So one of those is Jacob Krantz and one is the Blueberry Swamp. And so I wanted to put that on your radar in case you have any opinions about whether those sites should be used or not.
Where's the blueberry swamp?
Yeah, I've never been there.
Blueberry Swamp is in between FedEx and Bev's.
Yeah, it was
On Marshall.
the road that they put through
Right through it.
without really getting permission from, and we didn't know about it anyway.
Yeah.
Right
Anyway,
through the
I don't
swamp.
really know much about it, other than it's fairly inaccessible, and potentially an interesting natural community down there.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But yeah, so that's pretty inaccessible, and Jacob Grants is also pretty inaccessible right now.
it's where Marshall curves to the north.
Yeah.
toward the,
Yeah, it's right here.
Emergency vet.
Yeah.
you can see it in the map because it's like clearly. Like something.
Forest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no problem with this.
So is there I don't know the surrounding circumstances, is there an increase in rabies or is this just a natural thing?
No,
that
it's,
go
it's,
through?
I don't believe there's an increase. I can ask for more information on that. I think it's sort of simply the evolution of the National Rabies Prevention Program in this area. I know they've been working in Burlington for years, and they've worked in Williston before. The reason that they've asked again this time for approval again is the ask is different. The live trapping
Mhm.
to determine the efficacy of the vaccine was not a part of, and they put out bait stations in the past, but they haven't followed that up with the live trapping. And I think the goal there is really just to get data on if it's working or not.
Mhm.
Is there any concern about? These pesticides are getting into swamp water. I'm just curious if there've been any issues with that in the past anywhere else.
Yeah.
Should we be concerned about them putting this pesticides in?
Near wetlands and
Near
rivers
wetlands
and.
and,
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it's not a pesticide per se. It's an oral rabies vaccine, so
Oh,
the
okay.
animal consumes it and it becomes vaccinated against rabies. And I can look into that, but
Yeah, I'm just curious.
my understanding is that there's not adverse environmental impacts. And it really is a localized effect. There's like 50 baits per station. Target species are raccoons, foxes, skunks, small mammals,
Mhm.
terrestrial mammals. And they said their process is basically they're gonna scout all these parcels to see first if there even is a reasonable place to put a trap. It needs to be somewhat discreet. They don't wanna just leave it on, publicly accessible area. Most of these parcels are not highly publicly accessible, but Rosenmel Park, North Cemetery are some of the open space. And they need to determine if there's habitat there for animals that would, be attracted to the bait station.
Mhm.
I would just suggest that Jacob Krantz has some existing trails
Mhm.
that should definitely be put out of avoided. Both existing community trails as well as future planned trails with the park district.
Yeah, that's very reasonable.
Yeah,
We have the
some
right to
people start
decline
biking.
permission for any of these, so. I imagine that we can put conditions on use.
Yeah, we saw dirt biking evidence, so like there's pretty active.
Motorized or.
Well, yeah, motorized are like, yeah.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
deep ruts, and so we know people are going through there, and it's kind of a narrow parcel too. I'm not sure how you find it discreet. It's kind of like a ridge that you're going on and then it drops off. I don't know. Anyway, they'll figure it out, but it is a concern. People will find it or mess with it or whatever.
I can raise that might
I
not.
assume it doesn't hurt, like if your dog eats one of these things or,
No, I don't believe so, but I can ask.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
There will definitely be
Yeah, but
unleashed dogs in
Yes.
in that parcel.
running around smelling
For sure.
food.
Yeah, okay, we should move on.
Yep.
you've been busy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Trying to hit the ground
Great.
running.
Yeah, that's good.
that's great. All right, so the next topic is Green Up Day and planning efforts. Maps and materials needed, no mow May resources and the like. So we do kind of lean heavily on the town planner for telling us what's needed and how the commission can lend a hand. We also got a note from Eric that he's not gonna be available on this day.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be available.
Okay, unfortunately, I will also not be available on this day. Just because I hadn't, it's pretty close to my start and I hadn't planned for that and realized, but I definitely plan to prioritize this in the future because it seems like a great town
Yeah,
event.
I'm here, so I can help out, however.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you, Laura.
I did attach that media package
I
to
saw that,
the last
yeah.
email, so that has this document, the town fair logistics and instructions.
Mhm.
Basically the exhibitor schedule. And we have, or the Conservation Commission has, and I'll just scroll down here too, there's a diagram. They shared a table with the Energy Committee inside the tent. And the tent is located right here. So this is the area for it. So
Yeah.
I think that that setup is gonna be kind of taken care of by the town.
Mhm.
And the table will be there and then, yeah, any materials that you need that we have, like the no mow May signs, like I can help get those prepared in advance. I just won't be there on the day of.
Okay,
And so
In
we-
terms of maps, do we know what maps we want to print? I think we had talked about, some of the notes in here,
The trail maps.
from the, or actually it's in the minutes, yeah, trail, primitive trail map and,
Laura's gonna be the one there.
yeah, so.
yeah, I
Volunteering.
actually have a beautiful map that I made for a movie. About Sucker Brook that I can bring, it's the Crosstown Trail, so I can have that out.
Cool.
I have tons of pictures of pollinators that I can, backyard pollinators I don't know if that,
Mhm.
if we're gonna have any seeds or anything, but. By the way, sorry to take this, because I just remembered this. When I was out with the Vermont Master Naturalists at Lakeview Cemetery in Burlington. They had set up a garden, there, and they used prairie plants because of the type of habitat it is, mown and.
Yeah,
Just thought you'd be interested.
yeah. I use wildflower and prairie, it's supposedly a mix. We'll see.
Yeah.
It'll come
Anyway.
out.
So, yeah, whatever anyone suggests for me to have there, I'll just have there.
Well, whatever you're comfortable with, but if there is a map of like all of the conserved areas or. Something like that, I think that would be more important to
Yeah, I
have
think so,
out
too.
than like a priority map or something like that, which is.
I agree,
Yeah,
yeah.
conserved areas and trails.
Conserved
So something like that, yeah, there's a couple different, there's two maps. Let's see, can you make this?
Oh, this is one of the new ones, good,
Yeah,
yeah.
this is the current rendition
Yeah.
of
That looks great.
map 15, which will be going in the town plan when it's finished. And so this is showing, primarily approved parks, but then it's also showing the trail.
That looks great.
Which is
to me.
primitive
Yeah,
trails,
that'd be
desired
perfect.
connections.
It has the desired connections on there too, which that's one of the things I think would be nice for people to see is like.
Yeah.
So there is a vision to try to add connectivity.
Yes, yeah.
What is Jacob Grants identified as there?
That's
That looks
identified
like
as a
nothing.
desired connection. And this was a little, I think the language here is a little confusing and bears a little explanation. Essentially, something was labeled a desired trail if there is a known specific route. Like, okay, there's an unofficial trail here that we'd love to conserve, or there's a known route where a trail would specifically go in. And then a desired connection, there's no specific known path, we just know that we'd love to be able to get people from point A to point B. And so that's what was labeled for Jacob Krantz is, we'd love for there to be this east-west, connection across the north part of town from Catamount to Jacob Krantz potentially. And we want there to be an accessible trail potentially connecting to neighborhoods up north and to Mountain Road.
Yeah, I think that up north along 2A has been identified as a place lacking in trail networks and such. So that Reed's more familiar with that than I am, but that'd be great.
And desired trail, desired connection, and then is there another label?
Yes.
No, I guess that's it. The purple is
Yeah.
desired.
And the dotted is what, existing easements or something?
Dotted is existing trail easements, you're
Yeah.
correct, yeah, existing trail easements.
I don't think we should put any more effort into it, but the only thing that's not like the Jacob Krantz thing, I think it would be great, like maybe even just with a marker to just like dot in like. There's a plan to have a park here, even though it doesn't
Yeah.
exist today,
Yeah.
because I think it would be a good conversation starter with people, like,
Yeah.
what's this markered in thing? Oh, that's a desired park that we're working on right now.
Mhm.
Some black Sharpie, just like the.
Exactly.
Yeah, we can print that out for you, absolutely.
So if we had this map and.
I drew a circle around it, therefore
Yeah.
it's real,
Uh,
yeah.
And then the Nomos May signs, and I know the Nomo May, in the past, we've had a sheet of paper where people write down their street, they don't have to put their address, but just like, what street do you live on, what's your name? And how many signs are you taking, or whatever, that,
Okay,
I don't know if that sheet is still around somewhere.
I can see
You can see if
there's a
it,
sign up sheet.
yeah, Simon and Andrew both would have been the caretakers of that before.
The town files are deep hole with lots of wonderful treasures, but they're not always
Organized.
organized in the
Of
most
course.
apparent way. So I'm discovering new things all the time.
Well, if you can't find it, just collecting street name.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Is-
I have
is
a
it-
book.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we need a special form.
Okay.
I mean, I think in that spirit of the Nomo May, I think we said that another group is gonna have seeds and.
Typically, the
Starters?
library has like all sorts of seed giveaways on Bonnie with the library.
Okay. Yeah, cause I didn't follow through on that based on that conversation
Mhm.
last week. But I think the Nomo May signs and the location of, getting it out there is pretty much all that's really needed, right? We're not trying to like recruit names and phone numbers and email addresses, right? Cool. Okay. Well, thank you for doing that, Laura.
Of course, yeah.
And I guess I'd just say,
That's awesome.
Laura, there's no pressure to feel like you have to, be there every moment of the
Right.
morning, staff,
Oh,
it,
yeah.
whatever time you have to staff it.
Okay,
And I will be on site, so I might be able to help set up and, things like that. I don't know, depending on what Sustainable Williston's table staffing looks like, I may be able to come over
Okay.
too for a bit and visit with people.
okay.
Talk about what you like. Okay, that's Green Up Day. And
We're
let's
almost back on schedule.
We're almost back, 7:45. Review conservation prioritization map. This should be a big one.
Yeah, okay, so I guess I'll just start prefacing that, as we were talking about all the things that are in the town files, I happened upon, I was digging, yesterday afternoon.
Yeah.
When I found really the bulk of the, files that kind of explain the 2020 process. I apologize for not getting those out earlier. But we have a lot of information on this that I've started to review. We've got detailed notes on how this was done, from a GIS perspective, so that it could be replicated again.
Yeah, Melinda's great about documenting.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we have the map that was put together in 2020. And also a version of that map that labels the top 55 parcels. And I know in the town plan, there's some draft language right now that refers to this report. I think it's if half of those top 55 were conserved, we'd get to the 30% conservation goal that the
Mhm.
town has by 2050.
What percent are we now, like 16?
16%.
16 by permanent conservation. So that doesn't include open space parcels that are protected by zoning and subdivision bylaws. And that's always, I know when I was working with Jens and the community wildlife program, it's always a part of the debate, because those protections can be really robust,
Mhm.
but it can also be difficult to.
Do we have a
include
handle
those in this
quantitatively on what that might be? Is that another 5% or 10%?
It's a good question. I don't have numbers, but I'm sure we
Interesting to
can definitely
know,
find
yeah.
them out.
We might be, in the 20% range now.
Yeah, I actually think the open space parcels are pretty significant, so I don't know what percentage is, but I do think, if we do a revision to this, I would like to see us at least tracking the open space parcels, like to your point, Gary, like how many acres is it, where are they located, how many parcels are there, what's the average size or whatever, and then from there, we can decide whether we want it mapped at all, whether we want to include it in our conversation, or whether we want it to kind of just be quietly
Right.
happening.
Or even another level I was thinking of, is there any way we can make that more permanent by some kind of bylaw change or whatever, that the town could do? Because that would, if it's 6-8%, that's significant.
Yeah, well, so here's this
Yeah.
is another one of the draft maps from the town plan that actually shows the locations of pretty much all, except you can see, I think, I don't think Glazer's on here yet, maybe, yeah, Glazer's not on here, for example, because it's not finished, but blue is the open space parcels. So you can see it's significant. I think the question is.
So it's like light blue shading.
Yeah, light blue shading. I'd probably be.
I was like,
a
those look
little
like rivers,
more clear.
like streams.
I'll zoom in a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's maybe like maybe half as much or 2/3 as much as the actual conserved.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
big.
And I think really the question there is protection by bylaws is sometimes people refer this to as soft conservation, where it's inherently not permanent because those could be changed. But to your point, it can be very, you can make very robust protections, but require a very high bar to meet to remove those protections. And I believe this was actually a consideration in the ERF prioritization calculations is that, there's always the option to consider putting a permanent conservation easement on some of these lands. If there are some of them that feel more, particularly important, to get a
That'd be
permanent.
a great thing to have a few identified. It looks like there's also, in my opinion, you quick look at it, some of them aren't very valuable like that.
Mhm.
One in the middle right there where it just surrounds each property with a
Yeah,
20-foot
yeah.
buffer or something.
That's
That's not very impressive to me.
It's kind of a funny case, because I really think this is just a case of a development that was put up in the eighties before we passed all the stuff in the way that we do now.
Oh, yeah.
Is that up on Yance Hill?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the, I think it's the one that's on actually, connected to the sewer system because they had a failed neighborhood,
Community system.
facility, and then the town saved them and connected it, so
Yeah.
it pipes down to the village.
Yeah, that's all wrong. That's not how you should.
It's not how it
do
should be. I've been thinking a lot about this open space versus permit, or whatever, like, legal conservation, hard conservation topic, and one of the things, a couple things that came to mind are, one, a lot of these open space parcels are largely wetlands, slopes, and other undeveloped, or highly constrained acreages. So from that perspective, there may be limited value in putting formal protection on them because they're very unlikely to ever be developed anyway. Like when these rural parcels come in, right, they have to set aside 75%. First thing they do is they go, where are the wetlands? Okay, we're gonna include that in the open space. Then they go, where are the slopes? Okay, include those in the space. And next thing you know, it's like the open space parcel is like 70% undevelopable. So from that perspective, maybe it's less important. I also was remembering that when we did this prioritization, we actually deprioritized things that had open space parcels because of that.
can't
So
be
they got like 0 points if they were, and it was in the slide deck that you sent out last night. 0 points if they had an open space parcel, if it was an open space parcel, and then it got points if it was not. And the other thing is, the state is still determining how the state is going to measure its 30 by 30. What classifies as conserved for that purpose, and I think we should be thinking about it, but I think we really will want to align with the state wherever they decide. If they decide to include open space parcels, great, we can add whatever 8% to our progress. If they decide not to, I just think it gets confusing for people if the state is counting certain things and the town is not counting them. So in the future, I could imagine a map like this that shows them combined, and it just has some way of informing the public that, like, these are hard conserved. There's never gonna be anything built on these, and these ones are soft conserved.
Yeah,
It could happen, but it's unlikely.
what I can say to that is that it seems like the way the state is gonna go on this. Is 30 by 30 is gonna be permanent conservation only. Partially because that is just fundamentally easier to quantify and characterize and map. This kind of mapping, while it's something that we have the capacity at the town level, is very difficult, if not impossible, for them to do at the state level. It's too much granularity and they
Each
don't
town
have
has
the
different
capacity.
rules.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but with that said, 50 by 50 is almost impossible to reach through permanent conservation. So that is gonna be a different consideration entirely, and likely will include some measure of soft conservation targets.
What does the map look like from the birds, bees, and small mammal perspective. In other words, if you looked at a map and you said, this is what's actually like undeveloped versus and sort of usable versus like what's on this map, because I see a couple of those green spaces that I know for a fact are fully mowed like twice a week.
Yeah.
And so not really usable from like a protected or conserved perspective, but there's also plenty of things that aren't on that map that are like mostly untouched and unmanaged and would be perfectly viable as, you know, habitat.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think just looking back at Melinda's notes, you know, some of those things were taken into consideration to put this map together. But I don't think it would be too challenging to run an analysis that says, you know, what percent of the, you know, highest priority interior forest blocks are conserved, for example, just grabbing some metrics from Vermont Conservation Design, or saying, you know, what percentage of the forested habitat is protected in these.
We didn't have the really nice SWHA, like 2022 SWHA update. We didn't have that really enhanced data when we did this. So I was wondering with our criteria that we used, whether we should pull out some of the things that we were valuing manually and basically put SWHA prioritization, whatever, quality, the tier 1, tier 2, and just use that data to recalculate our prioritization, because that would take into account the actual usability of the habitat.
Could you just go back to that prioritization map? Because that is what we wanted to sort of ground ourselves in. The one with the numbers.
Oh, the one with numbers, yes. No,
Right.
got so many things open. Yes, here's the one with numbers.
Okay, could we just like familiarize ourselves with like what these parcels are and?
That's a little too zoomed in.
No, that's
Oh,
good.
that's good.
Well, 39's gone.
Well, I need to go back up a little bit.
Mhm.
Oh, so
Number-
that's
I
great.
think
At least
number-
part of it's gone,
Yeah.
you know, half of it's.
Yeah, it's off the list for conservation.
Well, and the other. way to
Although the
look at it
15
is that-
acres there on the top is.
Yeah, 15 acres on the top and 35 acres.
Yeah.
Spanning
So that
through the
will
middle,
be.
so, you know,
Oh,
it's
sure. We could try to put a conservation easement on it.
well, I think like you were saying. you
I
know,
think there
that's-
will be on the 15, they're giving it to
Yeah,
the
it will
town.
be town, the 15
Yeah.
and the 35 will
Yeah.
be town owned.
Right.
So that's, you know, there'll be 50 acres out of
So we
that.
just have like a legal cost
Yeah.
to like put an easement on it,
Mhm.
which would be minimal, because we own it.
Which.
Well, the
We could
easement
use
doesn't-
ERF money to do that too, so we have the money too, right? Well, I mean, we should be, we've used that in the past for legal work. So I think anything we can do to convert some of these properties to more permanent, so they'll
Yeah.
be more acceptable to us and to the state,
Right.
would be awesome.
But I think one of the one of the conversations here is, it is becoming. I'm not sure if it's quite exponential, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to achieve conservation goals through fee acquisition. And Williston actually owns a decent chunk of land. There's, you know, the amount of land town ownership is a lot. But with that also comes stewardship costs,
Mhm.
overhead costs. And so I think it's gonna be worth pursuing conversations about conservation easement
Purposes rather
strategies.
than
Yeah, and
Parcels.
that's gonna include conversations about, you know, what kinds of land trusts, perhaps smaller land trusts other than Vermont Land Trust.
Yeah.
Might be interested in participating with smaller parcels. And also just that conversation that has been alluded to in the past about, you know, is it the right time to talk about having, you know, in the community, a Williston-based land trust or some sort of smaller regional land trust that can take a more active role in helping to preserve some of these.
Dave, you were not here for this discussion.
Yeah.
But several times this has come up, and the question is we have an ERF. What's the point of a Williston land trust?
The
You might
point-
be able to answer that.
Yeah, the point of a Williston land trust is to spread that ERF farther. And to present additional capacity for stewarding those easements in that land. So. With a conservation easement, you're purchasing the development rights, the land stays in private ownership. The landowner is gonna retain a role potentially in managing that property. But the easement will present the appropriate restrictions on development. and contain the rules about use. So the legal legwork, the stewarding legwork, a lot of that gets done by the land trust. And because it's a conservation easement, you're saving a lot of money because you're not purchasing the entire cost of the land. You're simply purchasing the development rights, which can come at a bargain sale if the landowner is interested in really selling it for a conservation purpose.
Especially with the cost of development being so high right now, there may be people out there who are like, I could develop it, but like, I need so much capital.
Infrastructure.
Yeah, I need so much capital to build something here. I'd rather just, do a quick sale of the development rights, get some money and move on.
Mhm.
what is the, what is the differential on that? Like, is it 20,000 on the $10,000 development value? Like, what does it actually come to?
It's a good question. I don't know if I could throw out numbers, but my understanding from, the experience that I do have is that the conservation easement really is the only tool that we have to achieve our biggest goals of conservation. Because fee acquisition is just becoming exponentially more expensive. That's not to say that we shouldn't jump on every opportunity we have. But we also want to consider that capacity element of it too. And so I think there's co-benefits there in terms of you get land protected for a lower price, and the capacity of managing and stewarding that land is shared with another institution. And where those people are going to come from, or that's sort of a question, I'm not exactly sure myself how you would go about starting a land trust or finding the people who are interested in doing that.
Or who would run it?
Right, or
Yeah.
who would run it?
Is it a volunteer nonprofit
Well,
thing?
Dan
I assume?
Boomhauer wanted to start one in Williston, so if you wanted to talk to Dan Boomhauer,
Yeah,
he had that interest.
I also thought like there has to be other towns in Chittenden County or the surrounding towns that there have to be another one, and I would imagine joining a land trust.
Yeah,
Like saying, hey, like if Richmond, just saying, I don't think they do, but if Richmond had one, just be like, hey, Richmond, can it become the Richmond Wilson Land Trust and we will, contribute X to
mhm.
make it a regional plan.
God forbid we actually have a county infrastructure of some kind.
Yeah, I
We have
know,
a
yeah. that would
County
be
land
great.
trust.
It would be great to have a county land trust.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that make sense?
South Burlington's is volunteer. I believe Underhill has one that's volunteer. Many others are not, or
Yeah.
have paid staff. So I'm not an expert in these structures, but I know there are options, and
Yeah.
a regional model is definitely something that land trusts
Way more
will
cost
do.
effective than like each town having their own, it's just
Yeah,
too much.
right. And the main question there is just as a land trust gets larger, they inherently say, okay, well, we have to maximize our time as well, which usually means looking at larger and larger parcels, which is the reason why we can't just go to Vermont Land
Yeah.
Trust, even though they're right next door, because their threshold for, the size that they'll even consider is just getting bigger over time. As they have to maximize their effort. And that may change as a state, we get to a place where, okay, the biggest, highest impact parcels are, mostly protected. We have to start getting more creative about ways to protect small parcels, and there are definitely ways that that's happening even right now. Oftentimes, Trust for Public Land, Vermont Land Trust will sometimes look for ways to bundle small adjacent parcels together. But it is a challenge that is widely acknowledged.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know if you remember that Dan Boomhauer wrote us a letter. And he said, there's a small parcel. Do you remember that? And, you should really look at this. So,
Yeah, I remember that. I've talked to Dan a few times.
Yeah.
Why does that name sound so familiar for me?
His land is part of the Sucker Brook.
yeah,
He
Right, and
donated,
he owns another couple big chunks.
And he
of
wants
100
to-
acres that he wants to
Yeah.
conserve.
And I believe Dan Boomhauer recently negotiated a conservation easement on some of his land with Lake Champlain land trust, was it, or it's
I can't remember.
Yeah, it's a different land trust that I wasn't as familiar with, at least in the context of thinking about our location, but there are perhaps some venues we could look up for sort of creative ways of partnering with land trusts that might be interested. I know, for example, Vermont River Conservancy will look at
Mm,
small parcels, targeted river easements,
Like
river
riparian
corridors.
zone.
Exactly, basically saying, this whole floodplain is the river, let's conserve it and let it do its thing over time.
Do you see anything like that in this prioritization map, or is it all like forests and wetlands?
Can you go up to near the Winooski? Cause I think they remember,
You've got Jacob Krantz identified there, and then
Yeah.
you've got that entire global founders
Yeah,
facility
yeah.
identified as a priority. Like, what is that?
yeah, that's
That's-
interesting.
Yeah,
That's
unfortunately,
dynamic, organic, or whatever crazy, that's like the tactical weapons lab.
Yeah,
You're not gonna
A lot of
serve that.
contaminants,
Yeah.
all kinds of issues there, yeah.
Take that off.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
is
fair enough.
interesting.
I think one challenge with prioritizations like this is that oftentimes when you're trying to say, okay, well, parcels with more wetlands, great, or parcels with more wildlife features, great. Parcels that are bigger, great, is that though many of those criteria reinforce larger parcel, higher priority. And so you do end up with prioritizations that simply say, okay, the biggest parcels in town, those are gonna be our highest value targets. Which is intuitive, but at the same time, it does mean you have to look further down the list to try to say, okay, well, what about 39 versus 35, right? There could be.
Yeah, that's why we kind of did the color gradient, because the number, I mean, 35 is dark green and so is 4. So I think just looking at
Right.
the value of the color is what we really need to look at, not necessarily what the number is.
Exactly.
Yeah, I wonder if, more creative thinking might include, like, okay, the town of Williston has, 15 parcels that we'd like to see moved towards more permanent. Is the Vermont Land Trust interested in that? Because it might total 300-400 acres or something if we piece together these things and do them in a lump.
Mhm.
I don't know if they'd be interested.
And if you can look at them sideways and say like, oh, there's kind of a corridor.
Right, yeah,
there,
yeah. And maybe even that corridor, if it's small enough, might be something where you decide we can pay for something or try to facilitate the
Right.
involvement of a bigger corridor.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things to consider is that some of this conservation will happen in bits and pieces simply because when large parcels are subdivided,
Yeah,
it's gonna be part of the negotiations, and we're seeing that with Glazer, we're gonna get, 50 acres for the town. It's not the whole of this priority, but it's in that priority block. And there's another conversation happening right now with subdivision plans down here at this number 2 identified parcel.
We got briefed on this. It was one of
Yeah.
the last things that Andrew brought to the committee. Yeah.
And that could end up with 115 acres going
Mhm.
through the town in a very high priority area. So some of that is gonna happen on its own, and I wonder if that means that, the sort of questions about conservation easements can be a little more tactical in thinking about, desired trail corridors and
So
that sort of.
that has come up in the ERF discussion, and that is also the other item on this agenda, which I've officially now bundled
Mhm.
by bringing this up, is ERF prioritization plan, and trail connections have trail and purchasing trail easements has largely been, I think, signed off as an acceptable use of the ERF.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
that would be an interesting, I would like to see that, though, that desired trail map in the context of this map, and if there's like an overlap of that, because connecting trails from one end of the community to another sounds like a great idea and a great use of those funds, especially if like, in my opinion, if you're gonna go to the work of establishing a
Mhm.
trust to acquire land at a lower rate, then you should have another strategy with your ERF that is working on trails and connectivity
Yeah.
and whatnot.
So do we, I don't think we have that.
Well, yes, you're right, we don't have that yet, I could definitely put something like that, even just taking, the 2020 map and the current desired trails, I could prepare some kind of overlap. But to your point about the ERF, oftentimes even with a land trust, they're creating this infrastructure where they're gonna be able to do certain amounts of fundraising, they're gonna be able to be the holders of the easement, but oftentimes to make those purchases, we might still be paying money out of the ERF. There still might be.
Matching funds.
Yeah,
Of course.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's what we've done in the past.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we've paid stewardship fees, we've paid
Right.
legal
Yeah.
fees, we've
Okay,
out of ERF.
Yeah. Reed?
I was just gonna say, this map does take into account desired trail connections. So if one of the point values that was used to determine the gradient of green are there desired trail connections on the parcel? And how long, actually, I think it was like, is it
Great.
like, how long is the desired trail connection that crosses that parcel? So,
We need David to look
But it's
into that
hidden.
enough to tell us, because I think at one point we had $1 per foot that we were able, and it wasn't a lot. I mean, it would, you buy a trail easement, which is pretty long for $1,000 or something like that. We need to find out what that is and can we change it or whatever. I think it's like a couple bucks a foot or something like
Mhm.
that now.
okay.
And I'm trying to remember if any of the desired trail connections comes up when a parcel comes to us for something like an SWA.
It does.
Yeah, it does.
It does?
We
Yeah, during
always-
permit review, one of the things the conservation planner presents in the staff memo are there desired trail connections
Okay.
that cross it. Now, the problem is that only works if it's on our map as a desired trail
Mhm.
connection. So for instance, if you flip back to that, the new map, yeah, this one. So I've been talking about that I wanna add, before it's published, I wanna add a red line from here up to the Sucker Brook parking lot or up to the Sucker Brook Trail somehow, because I think that's an amazing potential hike connection for people in the growth center to be able to walk up to Five Tree Hill.
Boomhauer's a chunk of that.
And Boomhauer's a chunk of that, and I just forwarded to you, Dave, about this, the Packard family had
Mhm.
reached out and they own
Yeah.
another one right on Old Creamery, the corner of Old Creamery, basically, and 2A. So it's one of those things where like, we don't have it on the map, and so if those parcels were to come forward for a permit today, it wouldn't even be in the staff memo
Yeah.
that there's a desired trail connection, but
Right.
we've talked about it, and I even included it in the materials about the ERF, that like, we can do things like this, if we get funding, we can be like, yeah, we can give an awesome vista hike for people in the growth center.
Mhm.
So one thing to consider with trails, I haven't had time to peruse this too much, but I did locate this document. This was, I think, either
Yeah.
2021 maybe, or 2019, somewhere around there, where Melinda performed this analysis on the network. And just looked at, okay, these are some of our desired trails, our main desired trail network. And, how could we rate them in terms of natural resource impacts? Feasibility, this is a map where red means good and green means bad, I think, so red is the most feasible. green's the
Mm.
High
least.
scores are, yeah, that's should be swapped.
And public benefits, mainly categorized by this idea that you're saying of trails will have a greater benefit where they can serve more people where there are.
It's a heat map.
So, yeah,
That's why it's red,
Right.
it's a heat map.
so when I was looking through these documents, one of the questions was, the more trails you get, just like with conserved land, the more stewardship costs there are to that and the more maintenance costs, which I think a lot of towns are seeing this where your trail network gets so large that, it's a challenge just to maintain it adequately and make sure those trails are served. And so with this analysis in the notes, there was the suggestion of, do we want to consider paring this back? And having fewer priorities, but priorities that, might be more meaningful and more achievable in the short term.
Like picking like 3 desired trail connections and working on them instead of having.
Yeah, and then
So
pick
many.
another 3 if
Yeah.
you need.
If we
Right.
complete them, then pick more, yeah.
Yeah, that's good thought.
Yeah, the
That would
only
take
thing
a
we need
little
to do is
brainstorming.
make this more logical is the first map just needs to be switched to say natural resource
Mhm.
alignment, or like how well does it align with conservation of natural resources, and then the heat map will be switched so that
Right.
red is good.
The other thing that I just put out there, which is fairly, or it's definitely newer in the conversation around trails, is the idea of not building all of the trails that we could build
Mhm.
for the benefit of wildlife, knowing that there are benefits to having large intact forest areas that don't have regular human transit through them. And that's kind of more of a regionally thinking strategy, but noting that just because it would be cool to have a trail through one place, it's always worth considering if there are some places where you want to say, like, you know, let's have this as a sort of priority area for wildlife.
Because it's not only humans, people bring their dogs and the
Yeah.
dogs are
Exactly.
running around, and so this is a big impact.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you could probably look at Strava to see where people are walking anyway, and
Mhm.
if there are people using a trail that. You know, they kind of made between neighborhoods or whatever, but it's on land that we could put a conservation easement on. That's where we would wanna target too, cause it's not gonna disrupt any wildlife.
Yeah, it's already disrupted, huh?
So one thing I was thinking for today is, you know, as you're saying, today is kind of getting our bearings around this conversation, strategizing. Is, well, first of all, I can collect all these resources and put them somewhere so you can get easy access to them, so you can look at them in your own time. And second is just kind of filling out this list of what would be useful for you to help make informed decisions and have, you know, creative brainstorming around this topic from me. So things like that superimposed desired trails map over the ERF prioritization. Like that's a deliverable that I can prepare for you pretty efficiently and have for our next meeting if we want. Are there other kinds of maps or analyses that we'd like to see? That would be helpful for me to kind of start working on around this.
This is getting into the actual work plan itself of developing a prioritization list. So like, what other things would
Sure, yeah.
the commission like to see in order to move this conversation forward? I mean, the context that I'm thinking about this in is that we've got roughly $500,000 by the end of this fiscal year sitting in the ERF, and how soon do we want to start putting that to use? And so ultimately, I think that's what this effort that we're trying to get into now this year is to show the voters who just approved this, that we have a plan and we're getting ready to implement it. And that's what I would like to sort of focus on for the here and now. So like that kind of question of like, what do we want to see? I think is very important to start itemizing and then coming up with, I don't think we're gonna get to a timeline today of like, you know, first we'll have this, then we'll have that, and then we'll reach out to landowners. But like, we wanna get there eventually. Yeah,
The time sensitive thing to me is reviewing our desired trail network, because if we want that to go into the town plan, we have to do it probably in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
So reviewing the desired trail connections, this resource plus the new town plan map that was open. To me, that would be the highest priority in terms of just like time sensitivity, and then from there, I would like to, start having conversations about like, let's not talk about 50 parcels. What are like the next 4 that we want to like do some outreach to some landowners, and who's gonna do that outreach and on what timeline after that?
I think 50 is too much, right?
Yeah.
50 is kind of unworkable.
But it's a start, I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
important too. So is it, the town plan is 5 years? So I thought
8 years.
Oh, 8 years, okay,
Goes through
so I
30.
think that'd be cool to have a, you know, like, here's something. In the beginning of the town plan, we might get this 3 or 4 things done, and then maybe at the most, we said, here's the second half to consider. Or maybe we just say, when we're finished that, we plan for another chunk to try to accomplish during the second half of the town plan.
So I think the text is locked in for the town plan, but the map is what we could adjust.
So we could have priority
Right.
one, priority two.
And the town plan action items, which is a future agenda item in itself, is taking like that melange of very, like, it's like the word salad of all of those conservation strategies, tactics and everything, and sort of saying like, okay, what can this commission realistically focus on in the coming, months and years?
Yeah, that's a good point. It might be, to that end, it might be useful to do some qualitative goal setting to accompany this like quantitative analysis angle, because I think there are so many cool things we can do nowadays, tweaking this prioritization here and that prioritization there. Maybe the numbers change around on this map a little bit, and what was 1 becomes 6, and what was 7 becomes 10, or vice versa. But in a way, that's only a part of, it's just a tool for decision making. And what's gonna kind of guide your outreach is your overall goals with, what you want to see in the town. And so I think if you can look, for example, at those desired trails and say, just picking something arbitrary, hey, that, lake to lake connection, from Shelburne Pond to Lake Iroquois, like this is the greatest thing that we could do.
Having vision, like what's our vision?
Yeah, so if that was at the top of the vision, then we'd know that we would want to look at all of these parcels down here and create a strategy that is really focused on, conserving our opportunities for that east-west, connection. Versus, any kinds of goals that I think you could set related to desired trails and paths, or recreation access, or particular wildlife values, could help us kind of take a look at these quantitative maps and start to zero in on what
So
feels.
do those goals have to go in the town plan, or they could just be our own?
Yeah, just your own, and it
I
can be
think
kind of informal.
We could probably come up with a couple right now.
Yeah.
And one of mine would be, how can we convert some of this preserved land to more permanent conservation? That would be a goal. And then and second one might be, identify limited number of doable trail connections and valuable trail connections.
And building on that one, for me, it's taking what our existing resources are, like Catamount, Mud Pond, Lake Iroquois, Krantz, and saying, let's use those. Well, Krantz will hopefully be accessible soon, but like using that as the basis point of, sort of focusing out is like, if you want to build that connection from Krantz to Catamount, that sounds freaking awesome and possibly doable based on both the development and, the rights of way and the zoning. It's like, that to me seems a lot more doable than trying to connect Iroquois to Shelburne, but I don't know, maybe that's just because that's what I know.
Yeah.
But thinking about it, that kind of analysis, to me,
Yeah.
like using it as a starting point would make sense.
Yeah, and I think some stuff that may or may not be a high priority, but going from Hurricane Lane over to Oak Hill Road, that connection's almost complete now. I think there's only one parcel that if we made that, but maybe it's not high enough priority.
Mhm.
That's what we need to consider.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think those are all great points, and I think the idea of kind of building out from what's there. Let's see if I can go back to this. Where is it? This one? Too many maps open officially. Oh yeah, here we are. That does kind of inform you of some things, for example, we have this town-owned parcel here and open space there, and so this has a lot of value because the connection between those parcels runs through this adjacent land. And so you could look at analysis like that all over town. If we do have a priority list of what connections or target wildlife areas we want to kind of grow or connect.
For me, at the top list would be, making sure that all the hard work that went into the SWHA simplification gets into our
Mm.
prioritization map.
Mhm.
And I think we'll actually be able to pull out a lot of things that we tried to place
Mhm.
value
Yeah,
on
get fewer
individually.
parcel, yeah.
Take those
Take a third of
factors
the
out
parcels out of
and just
there.
put SWHA in tier 1, tier 2. Easy, done, because to me, that's gonna make it much more focused on habitat.
Mhm.
As opposed to just looking at like each component individually, like wetlands,
Mhm.
forest canopy cover and so on. I think taking a bunch of that out and just saying that's all in the SWHA at a much more detailed level, just use the tier 1, tier 2.
Okay.
I'm gonna make a suggestion for moving on that, in the next meeting, we should probably stay on this topic, because it seems like we've got some good progress. And maybe a consolidation of what some of the topics raised here, sort of writing some of those. What the commission has identified here as priorities, could sort of be presented as here's what we talked about.
Yeah.
And seeing those written down, could potentially be helpful. If there is anything that we need to do, like related to this trail connectivity on the map for the town plan, talk to Matt and find out what our window is for getting something like that done. Because it does seem like time is running out. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's like kind of like, I think our,
Too far.
Yeah,
like an hour.
Yeah.
we're done at this point.
Good 10 minutes.
Yeah, and there's no requirement for, weighing in on that,
Yeah.
But I hear you, I'll find out what the window is
Yeah,
regardless.
the town map was definitely developed outside of, the town plan. I think it was just like the select board directed the planning department to develop that map,
The official map.
the official
Yeah.
map. And so I'm pretty sure you could just amend it, but I don't know what the process for that looks like. But I think we should start with that sort of writing down of what we talked about today as like
Okay.
a basis for the priority.
There is a land conservation page on the town website, so if you're looking for a place to just kind of like gather all these different reports that have been done over the years, that might be a good place to do it, because I think. Other than we didn't wanna put up the prioritization with the numbers, because we didn't want people to get all defensive about
Definitely.
that. But we have the prioritization up there already without the numbers. And we could add to it that analysis of feasibility and impact of trails. Of potential trail connections and all the other stuff that you uncovered
Sure,
could all be on the website, and that way we could get to it, but also the public could benefit from being like, oh, the Conservation Commission has analyzed this stuff.
I can do all that. Excellent. Sounds good.
Okay, we've got a couple short other business topics. Now, I'm not sure if there is an actual update here, but it was mentioned. And we just wanted to, I think,
Okay.
revisit them.
Yeah, this might be quick, because
So it might be quick. The pollinator garden project, I believe this is the one over on the bike path
Oh, yeah.
by the
Yeah.
school.
I have not heard any updates, except that I know that Sustainable Williston has been talking about it's almost time to start doing some hands-on stuff there to prep it. A lot of what was planted was perennials, so it's really just
Yeah.
making sure that they come back up and replacing the ones that maybe didn't make their first winter, which they all look really good to me. And then preparing the area that just had wildflower seed to be ready to plant again. So the action item here, I think, is Dave, for you to connect with Deb Miuccio, who coordinated this project last year to put the pollinator garden in, and just find out what's the timeline, what, if anything, can the Conservation Commission do to assist. And I think there's not a ton, other than maybe if commissioners wanna volunteer an hour to help, or if we wanna put something on the website. I think what's it called? Publicity is maybe the thing that the Conservation Commission has the most influence on, is like we can improve what we have on the town website that shows. I know she has, for instance, pictures of the evolution of the project from different stages, like here's what the site looked like at the beginning. Now we did this, the Parks and Rec did this preparation of the site, then we put in the fencing. And then we planted, and then here's the raspberry bushes going in, or whatever the raspberry plants, so there's like this. I think we could put together something visually pleasing. That educates people, even if maybe they haven't walked there before, they're like, oh, I didn't realize we have one of these, and I can see how it kind of developed. And now one of the big points is, you don't actually have to do that much work once you've established it, because they're perennials and we've got it mulched and all this stuff, it's kind of like, yeah, now you just kind of maintain it. So I think just connecting with her and finding out what's the plan for this year and how could WCC support?
Does anyone know what's going on with behind that garden and why it looks like?
Dirt
there's
pile?
Is it, yeah, it just looks like a really ugly dirt pile, right? I mean,
It's the town's dirt bank, so if we need to do grading, if we
Is
need,
it really?
yeah, and it used to be, I mean, that whole area.
Yeah.
Gary remembers,
That's
is
my
that
point.
that whole area, including where the garden is, used to be 12 to
Mounds
18
of-
feet high of dirt, that
Yeah.
whole thing.
And
When they
mold.
created the playing fields on the far side of the hedgerow,
Yeah,
they scraped off
yeah,
all of
yeah,
the
Hmm.
fill basically,
Yeah.
and then they put in topsoil and planted grass to create the playing fields.
Yeah.
So all that soil that was taken off was piled up there. And then it's just a bank of soil for the town if we need to regrade, so if they come and take it, Public Works will come in
Oh,
with
yeah,
with
it's awesome.
trucks and grab stuff.
Okay.
So it's slowly disappearing,
Okay,
it will eventually completely be gone when they,
that's interesting.
as they need it.
So what I'm hearing for, I think for what you could certainly bring to this commission next meeting would be is there are volunteer opportunities. Great little spring, activity. I think we even got, I think there was an Observer article about it last time, right? When it-
Yeah, so Observer article last year and, yeah,
Okay,
So just repeating back what I heard there, so this is a project that's kind of run by Sustainable Williston. And I'd really be reaching out to see how the WCC could support. And what the opportunities may be there in terms of volunteer power or. Documentation through the website, other kinds of support.
yeah.
And so, okay,
Yeah. Andrew was pretty heavily involved last year because there was a lot to go through to coordinate everything to get
Okay.
it established. It involved a school class.
okay,
It involved Parks and Rec, it involved conservation planning and Sustainable Williston just to get it started, but now I think it's more of. What do we need to do just to make sure that it's maintained, it
Yeah.
doesn't go into.
so that it doesn't look like the dirt pile behind it.
Exactly, how do we make sure that it looks nice and gets, that people know that it exists and can learn from it, because the idea is for people to understand that it's. Once you establish a pollinator garden, these are the benefits that it's providing and it's relatively low maintenance.
okay.
It's a demonstration project.
All right, I think this is another one for you, Reed.
Okay.
The priority project list for
Oh.
school volunteers.
I think this was mostly the question, Chapin's public comment last time, which was that there's students at WCS, an entire 8th grade. House, 7th and 8th grade house that wants to do a project in May at the end of the school year. And then there's 3 8th grade students who are doing their 8th grade challenge and.
I asked my son, who's in 8th grade, what an 8th grade challenge is, and he had no idea. So this is not like not
I
everyone
don't know
does
if
this.
anybody, yeah, I don't know if everybody does it or if it's.
I've never,
It used to be everybody had
Used
to,
to be
yeah, when my
everybody, yeah.
kids went through it, wasn't
Really?
it? Yeah.
I guess what I'd say, following up on this, is from my perspective, I think it'd be valuable to, even if, we can move this to future items, but even just have a little bit of brainstorming from the commission on, what are some small self-contained projects that different levels of volunteers could do, because we have this, school volunteer power that comes up sometimes that's currently on the table. I know that Town of Williston has partnered with graduate programs in the past to have higher level volunteer projects, and then there are, dedicated town volunteers that are sometimes interested in plugging in, looking for ways to help. And I think it would be, just after this public comment was presented, it makes me think it'd be really useful to have kind of a running list of, hey, these are things that we'd love to get done when the capacity exists.
yeah,
And then when people reach out, we can, plug them into these projects based on what their experience and capacity and constraints are.
what is the role of the commission there? I mean, this is, we've got a lot of agendas. Sometimes we have projects to review. I think you teed one up that there's
Mhm.
possibly gonna be one in our next meeting.
Yeah.
So like, what does the town need from us in order to develop a list like that? Do we just need to like say like, yeah, you know, get a motion on the table and say, we want the town to develop that list?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, it's certainly something that I can steward. It doesn't have to be a big, take much of your time, but you also have a lot more experience than I do right now, so, I guess my ask for the commission is just to tap into your experience a little bit and, you know, maybe just create a document, where
Mhm.
you can list out some ideas. And I can take that and turn it into, you know, over time, a more formal list that we're curating.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily require input or taking time away from the commission.
I think that makes sense. I mean, if you look at the collective knowledge, both the regions that we live and play in, our, you know, professional and personal expertise, we're all gonna have like a really wide range of like, I know what's going on over here or there. So like, to me, that's why it would make sense, like, for the town to have something like that in an official town capacity, but then going to commissions like the planning commission and the conservation commission
Right.
is like the source for keeping it up to date.
Yeah, I think that it makes complete sense what you're saying. And so really, I think I see this more as just a, you know, short brainstorming exercise.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then something that has to be official or owned by the Conservation Commission.
Yeah,
We-
well,
That makes sense.
When we approached the CBU classes about doing projects, we put together a list of at least, I see 14, and I forwarded it to you, so you have it.
Okay.
At least 14 potential projects. Those were targeted at high school level. And some of them we weren't even sure if they were feasible for high school. So maybe we have some work to do to fill in the gradient of different difficulty levels or
Yeah.
strenuous rigor of the
Right.
projects, but we have a start and we can fill in from there.
Yeah, and I think it could be anything from, you know, your tree planting, restoration,
mhm.
you know, trail maintenance, gardens, volunteer work related to that kind of thing.
You also have like fully autonomous, like someone who has capacity and experience and is just doing this in their free time versus like an eighth grader who needs like
Right.
full hands-on, like
Yeah,
guided experience.
Mhm.
type
Yeah, it
of
may actually
small-
take more time than it
Yeah,
saves,
yeah.
yeah.
yeah, I've got a quick question,
Exactly.
semi-related to this. Do we have a trail networks person like Ann was her name?
She's back this
Is
year,
she
right?
back? I mean, do we have that? Cause I could see young students maybe working with her,
Yeah.
at least
Mhm.
walking trails and identifying issues and stuff like that.
We would love to have a trail, it's a goal to have a trail steward, I think is the
Yeah.
official name, or trail coordinator.
Yeah, it's like a
Trail
park-
steward,
trail
stewardship
steward,
coordinator,
yeah.
something along those
Yeah.
lines. Anne is currently away, but
Yeah, I knew that.
it's on my list to reach
Yeah,
out to.
I think she
to
comes
Ann.
back relatively soon.
Yeah, if Anne's interested in coming back,
Yeah.
it sounds like everyone would be happy to work with Anne.
Cause that's a place where I think younger students could
Yeah.
go with her and she could.
And she's town staff, so she
Yeah.
can actually lead public
Oh, yeah,
activities.
from an
Under
insurance
insurance,
standpoint, yeah.
exactly, yeah.
My son's mitzvah project was working with all of the mountain bike
Oh,
trail
cool.
crews and
Yeah.
doing trail maintenance.
Yeah,
And it was a perfect experience for a 13-year-old,
yeah.
cause you can play in mud and you can just
Hands-on.
give him a task and then just like, he can just do it for an hour. And you don't need to sort of like micromanage everything.
Or do all classroomy
Yeah,
learning stuff.
yeah.
In the field.
So I love trail stuff for, you know.
And it's something we struggle with and keeping ahead of
Mhm.
this trail.
Well, I
issues.
mean, even something as like building sections of puncheon
Right,
is something that, you know, you learn power tool skills, you're learning design and measurement skills.
Yeah, problem
You're,
solving.
you're doing some problem solving, you're learning a little bit about hydrology and topography and erosion and stuff, and I think. You know, Dave and Javen and I walked the field back here the other day. Where we had been a couple years ago pursuing creating a trail and. I think about a project like that being on the list and yeah, I mean, if there were 4 kids at WCS who wanted to do something, it's like, oh yeah, you could even, walk over and we could just purchase the materials and they could be in the parking lot here. Go out, measure the areas where we're gonna put them and then come back and
Right,
build a little piece of punch in and then carry it out and put it in place and that could be like a bite-sized
Yeah.
learning activity.
and the other thing, is on the other side of that, the more like ecological side, we're gonna have some Williston-based Vermont master naturalists very soon who will be looking for, slightly larger projects potentially to plug into. And they do amazing work in communities, and so I think it'd be great to think ahead a little bit about that, and whether it's something like, okay, well, we might want to put in a trail here, it'd be great to have an inventory of the plant species there or the invasive species that are there. Just thinking about elements like that. It can
Yeah, it's
be-
more of like a college level engagement.
Yeah, exactly.
So it sounds like there's interest in developing that list. It sounds like it's something that could sort of live on an ongoing basis
Mhm.
and be added to and checked off over time and okay.
No, it's good.
Anything more on that?
No.
All
No
right.
word from CBU, students, by the way,
Yeah.
not yet.
Okay. And then the new member orientation package, I would love to table this for an actual discussion other than just keeping it on people's radar, especially as we've got at least one new member joining. And I know Gary wants to talk about his future next. And so I'll table this for the next meeting, but I think we need to have a real discussion about it and identifying, even if it's just like a priority list of like, where to look for what and like,
Right.
but I also just think like, if there's a charter, like, is there a charter for the commission? Like, that seems like something everybody who's about to join should read. So I'm just using that to sort of tease for like, what are the things that we should be sharing with people who are joining this commission? And it doesn't need to sort of be like a package. It could just be like a website,
Yeah.
like a tutorial
Yeah.
of like, and it could be open for the public too. It's
Yeah.
like, this is what the commission does and what we focus on
That's a
and,
great idea.
yeah.
I think, especially just thinking about, if I'm searching for kind of valuable projects that have been done in the past, things like the ERF prioritization, we can have a list of those, these are things that the Conservation Commission has been involved with or put together or accomplished over the last, 20 years that would be helpful for a new member to be aware of.
Right.
And we put all those documents in one place.
And there's a lot of those documents in the Wild About Williston page as well.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're gonna table that for another future discussion and. I wanna give Gary an opportunity to make an announcement.
Oh, gee, it's
Sorry.
so official. So as a couple weeks ago, I was asked to consider reappointment, like we all do. I think is it 4 years or I think they said 4 or something. And I think what I've kind of got to a point where, after over 32 years of doing this, I also was appointed as a chairman of a board of a group of the American Chestnut Foundation for Vermont, New Hampshire recently, so I've got another whole chunk of level of work to do. So I decided not to seek reappointment. And I told David that I'm happy to stay on as long as you guys need overlap or, with a new commission member to help out with that.
And votes, because we need a quorum.
Yeah, I mean, I'll certainly be here. What is it? My appointment must end the end of June or something, so that would be, but I'm happy to be involved beyond that if it's needed.
Thank you.
So that's basically the gist of it.
32 years.
Well, somewhere around there, 32, 33. It was in the early 90s.
That's amazing. Well,
That
thank
is-
you for your
yes.
service.
Yeah, wow.
You're welcome. It's been
You can't
great.
quit now, you're gonna be like the 3rd or 4th longest tenure.
Oh, is that right?
Right, I don't know what
I can't remember how long Carl was here. He was in the 30s.
Yeah, in the 30 somethings.
Yeah.
Just a joke, no.
It's been a
well,
great, I mean, it's been super enjoyable. It's such a satisfying group to work with, and our accomplishments are really satisfying compared to what other groups in town have to deal with. I mean, it's not all gravy, but it's good.
I can only imagine what the town looked like when you joined. right?
Yeah,
And, I mean, I think of my neighborhood, which back then, the idea of incorporating open space into the planned development would have been.
And there was like no Maple Tree Place, all there was fields on
Right.
Route
Forest
2A
Farm.
there, yeah, it's just intense,
It's a lot to get through.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, so that's why I sort of think that new member orientation package is like,
Yeah,
maybe more pressing than,
I think it'd be a great thing to have, because
yeah.
none of us have had it in the past, it was like, wait a minute, what are we
We
in?
picked it up, but it's
Right.
been haphazard.
You just kind of show up at 7
Yeah, it's
AM.
like,
for
oh,
your
we do
first
that
meeting.
too?
Yeah, exactly. So I do think that, like, you know, ultimately, if there is a charter to share, then to me, that's the first page. But if it's not, like, that could be something that we could add to the work plan, is like, we kind of need a charter.
Yeah.
If we don't have one, that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it could start with just a list of what do we do, you
Right,
know,
yeah.
there's gotta be 10 or 15 things that would go on.
Exactly.
In general,
And there are things that over your
Support.
30 years of experience, I'm sure you could identify, like, some of those things are in the town bylaws, and some of those things are like, we don't know what. Send it to the Conservation Commission, you know,
Yeah.
so like that, well, so it's a lot of collective experience, and we'll miss you, but we'll keep
well, thank you.
chugging along. All right, I think that's probably it. The future agenda items are all pretty significant. Does anyone have any particular topics that they wanna cover in the next meeting?
I'll just add that these are all things in preparing for today's meeting. I reviewed minutes from the last, 4 or 5 sessions and just
Yeah, thank
pulled out items that it seemed like could be towards or higher on the list, just based on what I could glean from minutes. And any of these could be future items, but also anything else, like Dave said, that you want to throw out for priority. And noting that we will have a discretionary permit review for next session,
Mhm.
and the applicants will be attending.
Discretionary permits, in my experience of now 2 years, tend to take longer than the other permits, because it's our first exploration of a
Mhm.
project, and so there are some projects that we can get through, like the one that Emily set up for us, I think it was last week. It took like 5 minutes,
Okay,
right? Because we were familiar with it, we had provided feedback. Emily's sole responsibility on that agenda was to say, like,
We did everything
The-
and.
yes,
that you
right,
said.
the DRB heard your recommendations, they ordered it, and the applicants did what you asked. This is what the result is, and we're like, great.
So I think that's what this is gonna be, because discretionary permit is the later one, the pre-app is the one where.
Pre-app.
Yeah, so this one is a discretionary permit, we should have reviewed
already
this and provided
Okay,
recommendations
thank you
already,
for that
yeah.
clarification.
Yeah.
Yeah, so pre-app
It's
is
helpful.
when we are getting.
That's another thing that should go in this,
you know,
New
new
packet.
Yeah,
person,
right, that's
what are these things and when do they
Yeah,
occur?
yeah,
And,
totally.
That happens
Is
over
that
and over again, where we're
even
like, is this the
blue?
right step
Yeah,
to
exactly.
recommend X, Y, Z, or is that the next step, so.
so I'll say 2 quick things as we're running out of time. One is, I've been told one of the reasons this is my first assignment is that it's a fairly straightforward one. And Emily will be helping me kind of walk me through putting together staff reports so that it maintains the same format
Great.
and standards that you're used to. So hopefully this should go pretty smoothly. But I will, as you've mentioned in the past, I will try to have a specific eye to, what is the direct ask of the Conservation Commission, try to make that as apparent and easy as possible.
And if this is as simple as, they did everything that we asked them to do, and this is the update, then it probably like 15 minutes.
Okay,
But if there is like a more complicated ask, it's like a 30-minute
understand.
agenda, yeah, at least. And Glazer, I think, was 45.
Yeah.
That was after
Numerous times.
hours and hours and
Yeah.
hours and hours and hours of previous. meetings.
Yeah, right.
But we had to sort out the elephant in the room, which is that we were gonna lose the habitat corridor, and what are we gonna do about that?
Yeah.
So on that note, Emily and Matt and I have just been having some very preliminary discussions, this is largely coming from Emily's experience. And thinking about Glazer specifically, that it would be really beneficial in the process for the town to have Conservation Commission potentially involved earlier. In just using that Glazer example where you have this, here's the plan, and then you realize that it's gonna disrupt this corridor, and now we're trying to, backpedal, and what can we do to try to salvage it? Potentially having almost a mini step in between pre-application and discretionary permit where the Conservation Commission's approach sooner to provide input on the location of those resources and such before that kind of design gets put together.
I think that makes a lot of sense. The time to have done that would have been when the town was doing the special use permit considerations. They should have done the significant wildlife habitat assessment at that point.
Yeah,
And they never did that. We even sent Gary, Gary, you sat in on those
Yeah.
meetings like a lot. I don't know what the frequency was.
Yeah, they were a couple times a month.
Yeah,
A week
The
or months.
habitat disturbance assessment. It was hard because there was no specific, like development layout at that point. It was like, oh, maybe this number of units and it was like all conceptual, and so it's hard to do a habitat disturbance assessment when you don't have like a map of building envelopes.
Although sometimes it's better to have it before.
But if you have it
You know,
before,
if you say, okay, here's a
Yeah.
corridor, so don't land things in there,
Yeah.
So basically, the specific plan process for the town to do an end around of the bylaws and amend them really should involve an HDA. Maybe that's a recommendation, is it involves an HDA as part of that initial
Yeah.
process, because
Yeah.
you don't wanna get too far down the road. You've got all this sunk cost and everybody's like, well, we have to move
Right.
forward. We put all this time and effort into it, and
Yeah, but the only focus was on the view, and that was like, the view shed became like the preeminent thing for the basis of the special use permit. And that involved protecting those 15 acres on the north side, but those 15 acres were not relevant or germane to the wildlife disturbance.
no, but
Yeah.
they might have been. The location of the road and the rec path may have been designed differently if they knew ahead of time that we wanted to preserve that corridor, so,
Right, right.
yeah.
so yeah, I'll just say that this conversation is very early stages, but my take is that, your comments have been heard and, these are good ideas. I don't know what it's gonna take to get that change instituted, but it seems like low-hanging fruit in terms of that HDA should come earlier, so that it's not just a cursory thing. All this information should be on the table as designs are being made, as opposed to, oh, whoa, let's back off now. Now you have the sunk cost issues. So it's conceptual, it's a goal, but I just wanted to let you know that conversation
Okay.
was happening.
Great. Okay, we'll adjourn, and then until next time. Thanks,
So really,
everyone.
1 whole minute to go.
Yeah.
8:59.
That's right, 1 minute.
Now that we're closed, I have noticed that a bunch of projects haven't started yet.
Oh, yeah.
And I did notice that the one off of, I don't know, 5E.